What's going on, guys? Today we're going to talk about how I film interviews for my documentaries, and specifically we're going to talk about these promo interviews that I shot for Karate Combat. We're going to go over a little bit about my process, how I organize my interview and interview questions, and most importantly we're going to break down the lighting and talk a little bit about the gear that I use. So the first thing that I look for when I step into a room or a location is what framing or shot is going to give me the most depth. My suggestion is that whenever you guys are choosing a spot to shoot an interview is get as far away from the walls as you possibly can and try to shoot into a corner. That's what's going to give you the most depth out of a room. Now, a big tip that I have for you guys is definitely when you show up to a location, the first thing that you should do is grab your camera, set it up, and start just framing a shot. There's been plenty of times where I've showed up to set and I was like, okay, we're gonna shoot in this direction or in this location. And then when we got all the lighting set up and the camera set up and everything, and then I framed the shot and I looked at it and I was like, you know, this isn't the best place to shoot this. Don't rely on your eyes, rely on the camera, because that's what you're actually using to get this shot. Now, really quickly, I think it's important to take a second and just talk about the gear that I use to shoot this interview and most of my interviews, really. I shot this on a Blackmagic Ursa 12K using Sigma art lenses. And then for audio, I think it's very important that you guys record two separate audio sources. I usually run a shotgun mic that goes straight into my camera, and then I'll run a lav mic into a Zoom recorder. Now, the reason why I think it's important to have two separate audio recordings is because there has been times where I've relied on just my camera audio, like my internal camera audio, or I've relied on just an external Zoom recorder. One reason or another, it didn't record, or the batteries died, or whatever it was. And from that point on, I realized that having two separate audio recordings is probably the best thing that you could do to be able to have that extra layer of protection and redundancy. Now, really quick audio tip for the lav mic, I suggest having it about right here at the bottom middle of the chest plate. And that's gonna give you the most intelligibility out of the mouth, but also give you that nice deep chest voice. Then when it comes to your shotgun microphone, I like to place the shotgun microphone pointed right towards the middle of my chest. And I like to have it about 3 to 5 feet away, no more than 5 feet away from your subject, just because you want to get that nice, clean audio source. Now, let's dive into my favorite portion of what we're going to talk about today, and that is the lighting. So a general rule of thumb that I like to follow whenever I'm thinking about setting up the lighting for an interview is I like to shoot my subject against the light. And what this means is that I'm basically going to take my subject and I'm going to place my camera between the subject and the key light. And that's exactly what I did for this interview. The first light that I added was a key light, and this was a GVM 650B set to about 4500 Kelvin on a big aperture light dome softbox. And because this light is so powerful, I only needed to set it to about 5% intensity. And this is what it looked like with that light turned on. As you guys can see, it's lighting our subject in this direction, and we have a little bit of a Rembrandt lighting look on this side of our subject's face. And for those of you who don't know what a Rembrandt lighting technique is, it's basically lighting your subject in a way where you have an upside down triangle on this side of their face. And it's a very popular lighting technique used in Hollywood time and time again. Now, another important thing that this key light is doing, which I really loved in this particular interview, was I set it up high enough and I angled it down to just get a little bit of catch light in our subject's eyes. Now, for those of you who don't know what catch light is, it's that little sparkle and that little glare of light that you get off of your key light or any other light in a frame. And what this does is just give a little bit of pop to our subject's eyes. And to me, I always think that it just draws the viewer into their eyes and into what they're saying. Now, the second light that we added was an Aperture 600C on a projector mount, and lately I really loved using projector mounts, especially for interviews, because I love using a backlight or a hair light or even a rim light. And when you have a light like this on a projector mount, you can get extremely detailed with exactly where you want to hit it. And what's awesome about using the 600C is that it is a 600 full RGB light that you can manipulate to any color or any effect. Now, I set this light to a teal color, and I had this at about 3% intensity. Now, so far we're looking pretty good, but obviously the rest of the gym is in complete darkness. So what we did was add an Amaranth 300C, and we set it to this teal color to match the hair light that we were using on our subject. And this is what it looked like with that light turned on. The reason why we had both of these lights, the hair light and the background light lighting up the gym in this teal color, is for several reasons. Number one, to give color separation between the skin tone of our subject, which was like a little bit more of a warmer color, and then having a background color a little bit colder, we gave it this kind of teal and orange look, but it also gave motivated lighting with the lighting that we're using on our subject. So the backlight on our subject is teal, so it feels like it's coming from the background. And that is something that I think is really important when you guys are thinking about lighting in any situation, is where are the natural lights in this scene coming from? And because we were able to control the natural light coming from the gym, it just made sense that the backlight on our subject would be this teal color. Now, to give this shot a little bit more visual interest and just bring up exposure levels in the background, we added some amaranth tube lights. The first amaranth tube light we set to this teal color to match the background, and we put it in that back left corner over here. And that was to do two things: give a little bit of pop of exposure on this back corner, but then also bring up the exposure around that area. And then another little flare of color that we added was another amaranth red tube light. We put it in the distant background, and we kind of put it to where it was just peeking in the frame. To me, it just adds a little bit more of exposure pops in the frame. It just gives it a nice touch that I felt like was necessary, especially when you have them out of focus and you just have them kind of like these blurry, cool lights in the background. Again, you could do without it for sure, but me personally, I thought it added a nice little flair to the image. Now, I just want to take a second and give you guys a few final tips for when you guys are shooting interviews like this. The first thing that I would say is memorize your questions as much as you possibly can. Have a really good understanding of your questions. That way, you're not taking a paper and you're looking down at it. You make it feel a lot more personal and you make it feel like a conversation, because having a conversation with your subject is the best way to get the most natural and authentic responses. And then the other really important tip that I have for you guys is, if you can, try to do a pre-interview with your subjects, whether that's a Skype call or maybe even grabbing a cup of coffee, because you don't want the first time you meet them to be on camera. I always think that it's a little bit intimidating for the subject that you're interviewing, because again, they're not actors, they're not in the show business, they're not in the movie business, so they're not used to being on camera. And the other thing that I would say is give yourself 100% of their attention. Turn your phone off, tell your crew to be as quiet and respectful as possible, and do not, whatever you do, do not interrupt them while they're in the middle of talking. Let that conversation flow and just be fully engaged. And I promise you guys, you're gonna get the most out of your interviews. So I wanna thank you guys so much for stopping and hanging out. My name's Alex Zarfati, and I'll see you guys next week.